Man, I hope you're ready for a long podcast episode because today I'm going through the history of the slasher genre. Welcome back to the SlasherTalk Podcast. I really appreciate all the love and support on the first episode. I was extremely nervous to not only start the podcast, because I have this thing where if I feel like I'm not going to do it perfectly and up to a certain like standard with the sound and the video and um all that kind of stuff, my brain just kind of goes, then why release it? So it was a good practice for me to just kind of go, I don't know if this is up to a certain standard. I don't know how this is going to go. I don't know how people are going to receive me telling my story because it's not what people probably expected for a first episode. There's that anxiety with becoming vulnerable and being vulnerable, especially to people that you don't necessarily even fucking know. I didn't want it to come off as like trauma dumping or oversharing or looking for sympathy or whatever, but it was a great first episode for me personally, just to kind of like talk through it and get that out there. So I really appreciate all the love and support. That's been great. I'm making some adjustments here and there. I got some feedback from a friend of mine. I had no idea that I guess like the Spotify, um, the audio on the Spotify through listening to it through a car, a lot of like my voice was super low, but like my intro music was super high. So I'm figuring all that out. I'm just a boy. I'm just a boy. Um, so I appreciate you guys sticking with me as I work through all that stuff because this podcast world is so new to me, man. But anyway, this week has kind of been crazy. I've started to kind of get back into watching movies. I really need to get back in that habit. I watched a few movies. I've watched Cold Prey and Cold Prey 2, very underrated um, slasher movies if you've never seen them. Great little films. I went to go watch Cold Prey 3, but, like, I can't find it anywhere online. So I might need to, like, go buy all 3 of them on Blu-ray because I really wanna be able to, like, watch them whenever I want, which is why physical media is important. But that's another podcast episode for another day. So I watched that. I watched a screener called The Confession last night. I don't know if I can talk about that yet. Um, but I watched that last night. I watched 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, early screening on Monday, which was a shocking watch. I put out my YouTube video and my short form review about that, but I hated 28 Years Later, the first one. I hated it. So I had kind of written off this whole new trilogy, and I gotta say, the Bone Temple brought me back in. What Nia DaCosta did with this, with these characters and the story and the direction that she went, and she locked me back in, man. It was incredible, violent, graphic, uh, emotional, just everything about this one just really hit for me. If you share the same view of 28 Years Later, definitely at least give the Bone Temple a try. And if you don't like it, then all good. But I hated the first one, loved this one. From a content creator side of things, because I said that I was going to like kind of talk about that on this podcast as well. This week has been great with a slight caveat. I've been getting into, like, doing a bunch of more, like, trailer reactions, which I always said that I never really wanted to start getting into, like, reaction content, specifically trailers, because I don't like to necessarily watch trailers. I think trailers really ruin the movie experience. They can, because they show way too goddamn much sometimes, but I had a couple, trailer reactions pop off. I told some people that I would, like, react to their trailer, and that's really popped off. But so that's kind of like a new form of content that I'm gonna keep messing around with. People really seem to enjoy it, so hell yeah, brother. With the caveat, Facebook's a lawless place. I don't know if a lot of you saw my post I made on Instagram or Facebook, but I posted a trailer reaction, and some guy was so upset that I was in the video. He's like, "Can you move your fucking head?" And I was like, first off, what does it matter? Secondly, if you really don't want to watch the trailer with me in it, the literal first thing that I typed in the caption is the title of the movie. Go search it. And I told him that. Go search for it and watch it on your own. Randomly, some other guy comes in and was like, "Yeah, these homo content creators think they're all tough shit and have to insert themselves into everything." I was like, first off, what's with the slurs? Holy shit. Told him to go get some help. And then this other guy hopped in, and I don't know if you saw my post, but literally, word for word, tagged me and said, "Slasher Talk, maybe go kill yourself, you useless piece of shit." Hello? My man, that's a lot. Seek help, seek therapy immediately over a trailer reaction. The internet is a lawless place. It can be a great place. Like I said, I'm full-time at this now. I live on the internet. The internet provides me a lot, but god damn, it is a lawless place. But I made a post to show content creation is not as easy as people think, just like making all this content every single day. B, it's not easy dealing with the people that see your content and reading the comments, all that. I've been doing this long enough that it doesn't really affect me like it used to. I've gotten enough of those comments and stuff over the last couple of years where sadly I'm just kind of numb to it. But I use that as an example because some people think that I'm exaggerating when I tell people, no, I literally get told to go kill myself over a opinion of a movie. This was just a trailer reaction. So it happens. But I also wanted to use that as an example of like, don't let people like this bring you down. Miserable people spread hate. That dude, Michael, I think what his name was. That's how much I've thought about it since. Like Michael's having a hard time. He took it out on me. Whatever, Michael, if you're listening to this, I don't know why you would, because you clearly want to see me die. But if you're listening to this, man, I genuinely hope that you get the help that you need because goddamn, dude. Anyway, so let's just kind of jump into the topic at hand. I've wanted to do this history of the slasher genre for a long time. I've had these notes on my computer for a long time, and I've always kind of felt that I'm gonna miss some information. I'm not gonna talk about it in detail that people want or whatever. And but now it just feels like the time. Episode 2, Slasher Talk Podcast. I'm gonna go through just in general, kind of like the early beginnings of the slasher genre, what kind of got us to where we are today. I'm not gonna hit on every single movie, every single detail, because that would be such a long podcast episode. But I feel like after the end of this, hopefully people that really love horror, maybe they learn something or they just like to hear about this stuff in like a condensed format. I love to learn about this stuff. I just went and got a couple of new books. The Making of Monsters, and the Blumhouse 15 Years of Horror. I really want to start reading those. Um, I have a history of horror book that I really need to dive more into, but just like, I think doing this for me also will kind of get me in the habit of like doing more content like this, because history is what got us here, not just within like, our country and things like that, but just like even within movies. There is a history, and there's a reason why we are able to watch Terrifier 3 in a theater unrated. There is a reason. Like, there is a history there. So let's touch on it. Let's dive in. Hope you guys are ready. Bear with me. This is going to be a lot. So, early films that really start to lay the groundwork of the slasher genre. There are two major ones, and they both came out in the year 1960. May 1960, a little film directed by Michael Powell. It was called Peeping Tom. Now, I don't know if you've seen Peeping Tom. I just watched it a couple years ago, and I loved it, man. I loved it. You can really see from a 2025, 2026, like, just from a modern standpoint, you go back and you watch this film, you really see the groundworks, man. This was like the first film that really had that first person point of view that I think, in my opinion, was made famous in another film that we're going to be talking about here real shortly. But that POV within horror is such a staple now. And this is kind of like, I don't necessarily know if Peeping Tom was the first exactly, but this is the earliest film within the horror thriller genre that kind of establishes that. Loved it. But what's crazy about Peeping Tom is this effectively ended Michael Powell's career, which is crazy because another film, again, that we're going to talk about, kind of like is like his most famous film. It's crazy. Now, if you've never seen Peeping Tom, I would definitely recommend checking it out. It's about this serial killer that is making essentially a snuff film. And each victim that he has, he records their expressions on his camera. And that's where you get like the first person point of view as these women are screaming and begging for their life and things. You kind of dive in from the POV of the killer, and that footage is put into a film that he's creating throughout Peeping Tom. But it's essentially this guy creating a snuff film. And back in 1960, I can definitely see why this wasn't received very well. If you've never seen Peeping Tom, I would definitely check it out. Highly recommend. Great, great film. Another film in 1960 came out in September of 1960, Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. This, to this day, is such an iconic film, period. But in the terms of like horror and slasher, man, I don't think a lot of things that we've gotten today throughout the years would even exist without Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. If you don't know, I'm sure you guys already know, but Psycho is based off of a 1959 novel of the same name. It was written by Robert Bloch, and the novel is loosely inspired by the story of Ed Gein. Now, Hitchcock acquired the rights to the novel for $9,500, and he was, I'm going to make this movie. I'm going to self-fund it. This on my own. I'm making this film. To the point where he told his assistant, Peggy Robertson, he was all in so much that he told his assistant, Peggy Robertson, that I want you to go out and purchase every single copy of the novel Psycho so that the twist and the story and where this goes isn't spoiled. I want people to go into my film blind. I love the dedication, man. Psycho was really disturbing and graphic for its time. You watch it from a 2026 lens, and it's like, how the fuck is this like? How are people passing out and screaming and leaving the theater and stuff? You got to remember, this is 1960. This film set an entire new level of what was acceptable in terms of like showing violence on screen. That's just fact. If you could go back to 1960 and watch Psycho when it came out, I think you would see this film in a whole new light. Again, if you're first time watching this film in 2026 and you've seen a ton of horror films made in the 2000s and all that, and you go back and you watch Psycho, maybe Gen Z or whatever's like, this film's boring as hell. This film was is iconic. It was a massive commercial success. It was made on a budget of around $807,000, which today would be a $6.2 million budget. And it made $50 million back in 1960. It made $50 million. Today, that would be $384.5 million. Massive success. So then, we've got the groundwork here. We've got Peeping Tom. We've got Psycho. But then in 1974, specifically October 11th, 1974, we get two iconic films that are released the same fucking day. I'm talking about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Black Christmas. So the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was released in the U.S. on October 11th, 1974, and in Canada, that was the release of Black Christmas. It just so happened to be on the same day. Brilliant. Love it. In today's horror community, this is a debate, actually, whether Texas Chainsaw Massacre is in fact a slasher movie. A lot of people call it a proto-slasher, a film that, is that heavily influenced what a slasher film turned into. But you have a lot of people that say, no, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is not a slasher. It's a proto-slasher, but it's not a slasher. And I think that comes from the quote-unquote, like, rules of a slasher, which Texas Chainsaw has. You have a killer in a mask using some sort of weapon, taking out a young group of young adults or teens, whatever. That would essentially be a slasher film. The big caveat with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I think, is that Leatherface wasn't necessarily hunting these kids down. There was no reason for him to go out and start killing these kids. They trespassed on his land, his family's land, his family's house. They are trespassing, and he is just protecting his house and his family. Versus other slasher films that we have now, there's a history, and there's an event that happens, and the killer's coming back for revenge, or whatever it is. I think that's the big debate there. But I think it's really hard to watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre now and not see it and not be like, how is this not a slasher? Because it essentially is. But I just had to bring up the whole proto-slasher thing. It's a really interesting conversation. We might dive into that on another podcast episode down the line, because a lot of people, it's not a slasher. It is. It's crazy. But Texas Chainsaw Massacre ended up making $30.9 million at the box office. It did really, really well. Black Christmas, released October 11th, 1974 in Canada. In the U.S., Black Christmas released December 20th, 1974. The debate here between Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Black Christmas, which one was the invention of the final girl? Is it Sally Hardesty within the Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Because when you watch that film, she goes through a lot. She makes it out. She is the final girl. But a lot of people, and quite frankly, online, Black Christmas gets the credit of like, this was the invention. Jess Bradford was the first final girl. And I think because more people are looking at Black Christmas as this was more of a true base. Like, this is the true jump off point of the slasher genre. Because another director was heavily inspired by Black Christmas for his film. We'll get to that soon. But I love Black Christmas. I think I just rewatched it for the holiday season. I think it's just great. Very, very tense, I can definitely see back in 74 the obscene phone calls, again, the POV shots. No, it's not nearly as like graphic as, slasher films got back, in the future in the 80s and what we're used to now. But like, the atmosphere and the tension in that film is incredible. Jess is a final girl, the social commentary that it makes, like, it's an iconic film that I rewatch all the time. What's crazy about Black Christmas is it made $4 million at the box office. So it wasn't near of a like commercial success back in that day, but I would argue now that Black Christmas is just as successful as any of, especially Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like, the amount of like merchandise and anniversary releases and all that kind of stuff. Like, Black Christmas now has a huge cult following fan base. So I think over time this film did extremely well. We fast forward 4 years. 1978. John Carpenter's Halloween gets released. And this is the film. John Carpenter saw Black Christmas and he was like, yes, sir. Yep. That's my vibe. The release of Halloween changed everything. This did $70 million at the box office. And it wasn't widely successful right when it came out. It was more of a word of mouth thing, and it just picked up steam. Halloween is widely considered the turning point to slasher films and the genre. This established the quote-unquote rules. This established what makes a slasher film moving forward. No matter where you lived, you could relate to Laurie Strode. She just lived in a normal neighborhood. She goes to high school. She's a babysitter. Everybody had a babysitter at one point, knows a babysitter, used to be one. It just really brings the small town vibe to slashers and the genre. Everybody that goes into this film can relate to Laurie Strode in some way, shape, or form. And you've got this guy, Michael Myers, in a mask, hunting her down. That's fucking scary. Using the POV shot in the opening of the film, obviously it goes way back to Peeping Tom, but heavily inspired by Black Christmas. The ending of that film, of course, you've got Laurie Strode as the final girl, but what was unique about Halloween, which again, you can go back and they tease at the end of Black Christmas, that Billy's, still up in the attic and stuff. But like, what really honed it in on Halloween was you see Michael supposedly dead, then it cuts back to where he was laying and he's gone. So a lot of audiences were leaving the theater with this feeling of like, The evil is still out there, lurking around. You take that feeling home with you. And obviously, you fast forward, and Halloween turns into a massive franchise with so many sequels, so many different timelines now. Laurie Strode keeps being brought back for new sequels and new movies and things like that. Like the impact that Halloween had on not only the horror genre, but the slasher genre in specific just cannot be denied. Now, this next film that came out in 1980, there were a couple of people that saw what was happening with Halloween and said, boy, I want a fucking piece of that pie. Sean Cunningham and Victor Miller with Friday the 13th. Sean Cunningham ran an ad in a newspaper promoting this film called Friday the 13th. He said, I wasn't sure if I could use the name Friday the 13th. But Halloween used Halloween. I'm not sure if I can use Friday the 13th or not. So he ran an ad in a newspaper and promoted the most terrifying film ever made, Friday the 13th, just to see if they would get sued. Not only did they not get sued, production companies and distributors were calling, being like, we want to see the film. We want to see the film. We want to buy the film. Like, let's fucking go. Halloween was such a massive success. We were in the we are in the market for slasher films. Most terrifying film ever made, Friday the 13th. Give it to me. But what was crazy is a script wasn't even written. So, case in point, fake it till you fucking make it, dude. Like that's crazy work. So then Sean got in contact with a writer, Victor Miller, which he's been on record to say, which the fan base always argues with me. And I understand you like Friday the 13th better than Halloween, whatever. But at this point in time, Victor literally said, like, we just set out to rip off Halloween. We saw how successful it was. We were just going to rip it off. Case in point. Whatever. Of course, Friday the 13th does set a new standard for slasher. It's not the exact same film. They do their own thing. But baseline, that was the approach. Friday the 13th ramps up the gore to 11 with Tom Savini's special effects. Heavily inspired, and we'll get into this later, but Friday the 13th was taking a lot of inspiration from the Italian horror scene, the giallo scene. That scene was very heavy on gore and practical special effects. And Friday the 13th said, we're going to take that, insert that here. Halloween might be tense and anxiety inducing and all that, but we're going to show these kids getting fucked up. And Tom Savini was the man for the job. Absolutely. Obviously, massive success. Pamela Voorhees, Jason Voorhees, it spawned into another massive franchise, which now Jason is getting revitalized through the Jason universe. There's been a big lawsuit with Sean Cunningham and Victor Miller, which is just been a huge needle in that franchise's side. They can't do anything new. They're finally starting to get things worked out. We're getting a new, the Camp Crystal Lake show from A24. Jason Universe is starting to put some stuff out. So hopefully Jason can get, revamped, revitalized for the future, because it's been a long time since we've had anything from them. But obviously, Friday the 13th came out in 1980 and just went fucking nuclear, man. In my opinion, a lot of the movies in the franchise aren't that very good, but that's besides the point. It made $59.8 million in the box office, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I'm pretty certain in the grand scheme of things, correct me if I'm wrong, I know you will in the comment section, that I think Friday the 13th is like the most financially successful slasher franchise to exist. I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure somebody yelled at me for that, and that's what they used to counter argue Friday the 13th versus Halloween, but I could be wrong. There was another film in 1980 that we're going to talk about, which again stars Jamie Lee Curtis. It's called Prom Night. And what's unique about Prom Night is Paramount actually they wanted Prom Night. They wanted Prom Night, but they ended up choosing Friday the 13th. From a 2026 lens, great choice. Great choice. You fucking nailed it. This was another one that starred Jamie Lee Curtis. Not near as successful as Friday the 13th or Halloween or any of that. It was just another film, especially with Jamie Lee Curtis at the helm after Halloween, that this film just kind of helped the genre keep moving forward. So now the rules have been set for the slasher genre. You have to have a killer, typically wearing some kind of mask and some sort of unique instrument, whether it be a chainsaw or a butcher knife or whatever it is. There has to be victims, typically young groups of teens, young adults. There now is a history, but with the killer. Why is this killer doing what he's doing to the victims? There's typically now a final boy, final girl at this time, final girl. Everything is set within some sort of setting. Halloween was a normal neighborhood. Friday the 13th takes place at a campsite. Now the rules are set, and we are going into just years of slasher. They start pumping these things out. And this set of films I alluded to this earlier, were heavily inspired by the Italian genre, giallo. Films from Mario Bava, who did A Bay of Blood, Black Sabbath, Blood and Black Lace. You have Dario Argento. He did Suspiria, Opera, Deep Red. He got Fulci, The Beyond. They just godfathers of gore. The slasher genre was taking this. The U.S. was taking these things from the Italian and just ramping the violence and the gore to 11, and we start churning these things out. In 1981 alone, you had Happy Birthday to Me, you had The Prowler, you have Burning, you have Graduation Day, The Fun House, which was another film directed by Tobe Hooper, who did Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You have Madman. These things just started being churned out. And part of that was what's called the tax shelter era. If you don't know anything about this, in Canada, there was a tax law that was implemented that really was the catalyst for a lot of these films being produced from 1975 to 1982. These films are called tax shelter films. And the law was investors were able to write off 100% of their investment of a film, of a Canadian feature film, which allowed these films to be profitable from day one. If you're able to write off 100% of your investment, whatever you make in the box office or, VHS sales at this time or whatever, that's just pure gravy, man. So why would you not take advantage of this? But there were rules. The film had to be 75 minutes long. There had to at least be one producer and 2/3 of the above line creative. They had to be Canadian. So you're talking like producers, director, all that kind of stuff. And then 75% of the production had to be in Canada, at least 75%. The movies that came out of the tax shelter era, some of them, movies like Black Christmas, 1974. This is when if anybody can explain this to me, actually, when I do research on this, it says the tax shelter era was from 1975 to 1982, but Black Christmas came out in 1974. But every time I look up tax shelter films, Black Christmas is like the first one. So if you know what witchcraft was used, I would appreciate it. But Black Christmas, Prom Night, Terror Train, Happy Birthday to Me, My Bloody Valentine, Ghost Keeper, a film called Humongous, never seen it, American Nightmare, Curtains. Curtains is an underrated slasher film if you've never seen it. So a lot of slasher films, a lot of films were coming out of Canada. And it was because of this tax shelter law, which I think is great. That provided a lot of people an avenue to make these films. But the basis of slashers just in general, well, the horror genre in general, but slashers specifically, you can pump out these scripts, give the killer a new mask, a new weapon, a group of people to slaughter, a location. If you keep that location a one location, your production costs and things are suddenly super cheap. So then if you go up to Canada and you're able to write that off 100%, fuck yeah, brother. Hell yeah. Like, no wonder these things were being pumped out. But 1981, My Bloody Valentine, is one of the most iconic Canadian slashers. And this one pushed the boundaries even further than Friday the 13th. This was a very mean-spirited film, to the point that Paramount viewed the film and said, yo, dog, unless you get an MPAA rating for this movie, we are not touching this. Like, we are not touching this. It was just a very bloody, mean-spirited film. So now that we have all these slasher films coming out, the horror genre is now being overly criticized for being misogynistic. Nothing has really changed. Which, if you sit back and you look at it, yes, a lot of it is male killers going after and killing females. So, like, I get the baseline criticism, right? But the final girl trope, to me, in my personal opinion, the final girl trope, to me, just kind of counters that. And is like, we are empowering these final girls for what they've gone through, and they come out on top at the end. So to me, that's how I view it. But whatever. But writer Rita Mae Brown and director Amy Holden Jones, they saw what was being talked about from this misogynistic standpoint of horror, and they set out to parody this. And it's a film called Slumber Party Massacre. This is a satirical take on the slasher genre. And when you watch this film, because I did a few years ago, and honestly not really knowing the history behind this film and how it was supposed to be satirical, I was watching this film and like, brother, we are just in there on these women taking showers. Just check out their naked ass, and then we're going to go up and here's their boobs. Watch these women take a shower for way too long. And I'm like, brother, like, what? Like, we get it, man. But that was the entire point. And I think when you view Slumber Party Massacre from this like satirical viewpoint, I think they fucking nailed it, man. So in 1982, we started to kind of see a few creatives start to be satirical with the genre. And we would see that come back into play years and years and years later. 1984, we have a film called Silent Night, Deadly Night that was released, and this is when shit really just fucking hits the fan. Silent Night, Deadly Night caused so much panic and controversy and protests across the nation because it had an ad on TV that showed Santa Claus as a killer. So many groups, parents, mothers, they were getting on phones and calling people to protest. They were really just trying to get this TV ad removed. They were out in front of theaters with picket signs, walking around. This was a huge deal. This was national news. The protest and anger that was put on Silent Night, Deadly Night, so much so that TriStar Pictures not only ended up removing the ads, but they pulled the film from theaters. Like, it fucking worked. Now, the film did end up being put back into theaters in 1985, and they readjusted some marketing to not show the Santa Claus killer and all that, but in 1984, this was the controversy. Parents were so upset, and it worked. It worked. Like, the ads got pulled, the movie got pulled, and the financial success of this movie was essentially just cut at the fucking knees. Now, again, looking at it from a 2026 lens, it has a massive cult following, and it has lots of sequels. The reimagining just came out. I thought it was great. So in the long run, it wasn't necessarily like overly hurt. It found some success, but in 1984, this was controversial. Okay, so we talked about Silent Night, Deadly Night in 1984, but in general, fatigue of slasher films really started to set in. The box office numbers were showing it. It just, people were tired of the same old, copy and paste. And that's like a big thing with slasher films in general is like eventually, what more can you do? Man, mask, weapon, kill, final girl, whatever. Seen it before. Well, Wes Craven said, hold my fucking beer, because in 1984, he released A Nightmare on Elm Street, which introduced the iconic, the sadistic, the legendary Freddy fucking Krueger. And this changed the game because Freddy, all of a sudden, he had a personality. He talked. A lot of these killers in these slasher films were silent but deadly. All of a sudden, Freddy Krueger, he is a personality that you get to know. He interacts with his kills in a different way. Then you introduce this whole supernatural dream state. Not only are you fearing for your life when you're awake, but that comes from the anxiety of, I cannot sleep because this motherfucker can get me in my dreams. Such a fantastic switch up. And obviously, Nightmare on Elm Street blew up. Freddy Krueger is an icon. He's a legend. Would love to see the rights of Nightmare on Elm Street kind of get sorted since Wes Craven, from what I know, the Wes Craven estate is really just holding this shit hostage. But I know that's above my fucking pay grade. But yeah, 1984, Wes Craven really just changed the game and like revitalized and reinvigorated slasher films with the debut of Freddy Krueger. That's when you started seeing a bunch of sequels getting made. Halloween's got its sequels, Friday the 13th got its sequels, Nightmare on Elm Street started producing sequels. All this. 1988, we have another switch up with Child Play. We get Chucky. And I always thought Chucky was cool, man. I get a kick out of Chucky. It just brings something new to the table. He's this fucking 2.5-foot fucking doll that has a literal serial killer that through a voodoo ritual put himself in this doll so he doesn't get taken by the fucking cops. And I love it. I love it. Child Play, again, spawned into a massive franchise. Multiple sequels, TV show, so much merchandise and spots at Universal Halloween Horror Nights, the same as Halloween, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street. Like it is when people talk about the iconic slashers, is usually Leatherface, Michael, Jason, Freddy, but Chucky's right there. Chucky's right there. So from 1988, with the release of Child's Play, things are kind of just the same old, same old. You get all these sequels. I'm not saying films didn't come out, but stuff was just kind of really dead in the water. Fatigue was just like people were just kind of fucking over it. And then in 1996, Wes Craven said, "Watch me do it again," with a film called Scream. Of course, this film was written by Kevin Williamson, but I think it's insane that just like in 1984, 12 years later, in 96, Wes Craven revitalizes the slasher genre again. And it's really a lot of Scream takes major inspiration from A New Nightmare. So arguably, he did it 3 fucking times because A New Nightmare was an entirely new approach. It was really meta and used the actual actors within the film, and it was so meta for the time, and I don't think that A Nightmare on Elm Street or A New Nightmare really did very well commercially, but if it wasn't for A New Nightmare, I don't think Scream exists. That's my opinion. But 96 Scream revitalizes everything. The meta commentary, the self-awareness, you have characters within the movie talking about the horror genre, talking about horror movies, talking about the icons that at this point we all know and love. It was cool, man. It was fucking cool. Plus you throw in the whodunit sort of aspect with, who's behind the mask, who's the killer. Scream just set a new standard. It revitalized everything, and Scream spawned so many films after it that it was just a new era. Scream also was one of so unique because a lot of slasher films and horror films in general, you have unknown cast. You have these these unknown people, so many people, but when you go back and you look, they got their start in horror, and at the time, they were unknown. Johnny Depp, Jennifer Aniston. I'm not gonna go down the list, but just to name 2 off the top of my fucking head. But Scream did not take that approach. Scream was like, look at our fucking stacked cast. Drew Barrymore, arguably one of the hottest, and I'm not saying in terms of looks, although, if I may say, one of the biggest, hottest actors at the time in Scream. Courtney Cox, of course, she's in fucking Friends. David Arquette, you have Neve Campbell. She had some sort of TV show at the time. Again, I don't have it in front of me. I don't know the name of it off the top of my head. But this was a cast that people knew. And going into Scream for the first time with the advertisement of Scream, it was like Drew Barrymore is the star. Drew Barrymore is the star. So when you go into this movie and she's dead in the first scene, all expectations are out the door. What the fuck is going on? So just in so many different ways, Scream just really said, you think you know what you're getting in this movie? Bet. The fuck you do. And to this day, Scream is a lot of people's favorite horror. I've always been asked, like, if you could take one horror movie on a deserted island and watch it for the rest of your life, Scream. Like, it's just such an easy watch, and it was a film that for me personally as a horror fan, it was so crucial to my love of horror. If it wasn't for Scream, I don't know that I would love horror the way that I do today. So Scream will forever hold a special place in my heart. No matter the bullshit that the franchise is going through right now, and I hate it, but the original Scream, no matter what happens, will always just hold a place in my heart. And Wes Craven, rest in peace, like Kevin Williamson, the entire cast, just like, thank you for Scream. I know that might be just like a basic answer or basic comment, but if it wasn't for Scream, I don't think Slasher Talk would even really exist. But like I said, Scream would spawn an entire new era of films. We've got the Final Destination franchise, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Urban Legend, The Faculty, Cherry Falls, super underrated. If you haven't seen Cherry Falls, please change that. Valentine. Like a bunch of these films, I can't. Fuck, you can probably throw Cry Wolf in there too. I don't know. Cry Wolf is kind of underrated as well. But with the release of Scream, you have all these, you know, to me, just like staple films. If it wasn't for Scream, none of these would probably even exist. So Scream kind of revitalizes everything. And you're just getting years and years and years of just, here's horror, here's more slasher films. Love to see it. Scream had so many fucking sequels. I Know What You Did Last Summer had so many sequels. It got revitalized. Obviously, Scream is back. So Scream was the big catalyst at just kind of bringing horror back to the forefront, bringing new life, into the genre. You love it. So you've got Scream that has revitalized everything, and you had another big surge, but eventually things kind of take another fatigue. People are over it, whatever. The new shininess, the new meta thing, it's gotten old, it's wearing off, whatever. So about the mid 2000s, there is a surgence in, okay, we're going to go back and we are going to remake, reboot, revitalize the key films that even started this fucking genre. We're going to go back and we're going to make them for a new generation. We're going to revitalize this shit again. You saw it in 2007 with Halloween, directed by Rob Zombie. I personally like this take. I love Rob Zombie's take on Halloween. I need to rewatch Halloween 2 again. I just can't get myself to get behind that one. Chuck, if you're listening to this, I know you love Halloween 2. Chuck thinks Halloween 2 is like the best Halloween to ever exist. And I want to get to that level. I want to see it how Chuck sees it so bad. This year, I'm going to rewatch it and really give it another fair shot. But in 2007, you have Halloween being remade for a new generation. You have a bunch of people that had never even seen the original Halloween. You're introducing this character, this franchise, to a whole new set of younger people. 2009, do it again. Friday the 13th, which again, I love that movie. In the grand scheme of things, I think the 2009 Friday the 13th is the best one. And I know you 80s loving, diehard 80s, just big Friday the 13th fanboys hate to hear it. I know I pissed so many people off, and I was just people scream at me. But that's my truth. I love the 2009 Friday the 13th. I think it fucking rips. 2010, Nightmare on Elm Street. Sag. You hate to fucking see it, man. I can't even talk about this with a straight face. Oh my God, my heart hurts for that movie. Jackie Earl Haley is not your fault, brother. When I heard that he was playing Freddy Krueger, I was all in, dude. I thought, I still think he's a fantastic actor. I remember going to that opening night in the theater, so excited, midnight showing, man, and we left, and I was like, "Holy fuck, that was bad. That was bad." I loved some aspects about it. I loved how they, like, transitioned from, like, the real world straight into the dream world and things, like, I love some aspects, but overall, man, it's just bad. 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 I skipped this. Holy fuck. I skipped it. 2003, Texas Chainsaw. Jessica Biel. Arguably one of the best horror remakes to exist. That really got the train rolling. Idiot. I fucking skipped all over that. How did I do that? You can yell at me in the comments. That's fine. So by 2010, you have the main four: Leatherface, Michael, Jason, and Freddy. They've all been rebooted. The Texas Chainsaw got several sequels. Halloween got Halloween 2. Of course, 2018, Halloween Kills, Halloween Ends. Fuck, Halloween Ends. Fuck that movie. Oh, I said it. I said Halloween Ends, and now I'm mad. Whatever, that's another podcast for another day. Anyway, so the big four have been rebooted at this point. There's one in 2012. With all four of the major ones rebooted, I loved that we got a reboot of Maniac. If you've never seen the original Maniac, great film. If you've never seen the original Maniac from 1980, it's a fantastic film. It's one of the ones, I think it's one of like the first ones that you really follow the killer from his point of view. You follow Frank, the serial killer, almost the entire time. Not from like his perspective, from his eyes, but you follow him. You're not following the victims, and then Frank comes in and does his thing, and you follow the victims. Like, you are following Frank pretty much the entire time. That's what I loved about it. The remake in 2012, Elijah Wood, it's one of the most creative, underrated, underspoke about horror movies, just period. But in the remake conversation, they took you follow the killer to a whole new level, because the Elijah Wood one is from his perspective. You are Frank. You are Elijah Wood playing Frank. And throughout the film, when he goes up to, like, bathroom mirrors and things, you see his reflection. Like, the entire movie, like, you are the killer. I think it's brilliant, and it needs to be talked about more. And then there was a film in 2016 that was released that, in my opinion, we are currently living in the results, and we are currently living in and seeing its inspiration. We are seeing its effect, not only within, independent horror, but horror in general. And that's Terrifier, directed by Damien Leone. There's several things that I want to talk about here. Obviously, Terrifier goes back to more of a grindhouse practical special effects. It's about the gore. You have a clown killer, Art the Clown, expertly played by David Howard Thornton. There was a short. Before you yell at me, stop it. Yes, I know. There was All Hallows Eve. And All Hallows Eve is made of the Ninth Gate, the Terrifier short, all that. I know. But 2016, the release of the full-length film called Terrifier really changed the game, in my opinion. I first saw this film when it launched on Netflix. I remember I ordered a Hungry Howie's pizza. It's when I lived in Florida. And I sat down with my Hungry Howie's pizza. I pulled up Netflix, as you do, and there was the top banner horror, movies we think you like based off your preferences, and there was a picture of Art the Clown sitting in the booth in the pizza shop, and just his facial expression, I was like, holy shit, I love clowns. This guy looks scary as hell. Yes, please. Hit play. And then I get to the scene. The scene. The famous hacksaw scene featuring Catherine Corcoran as Dawn. She's hanging up, and Art the Clown saws her in half. When I saw that for the first time in my living room, in my house in Florida, on Netflix, I literally sat back and I said, how in the fucking hell is this on Netflix? How? I love it, but how? Got done with the movie, and from that moment forward, I was telling everybody that would listen, which at this point, I didn't have a platform. I didn't have people that really took my opinion of horror seriously. I didn't have people that really talked about horror in the way that I wanted to talk about horror. So I'm like, man, people really need to pay attention to Terrifier and this Art the Clown character, because this motherfucker is going to blow up. And blow up, it did. Because with the release of Terrifier 2 in theaters, the entire first night when the guy passed out and it went over Twitter and it went viral, everybody raced to the theater. Terrifier 2 became essentially an overnight success, and now it has the studio's attention. And what Damien and the team did, again, I have to acknowledge this. What, Dread Central and Steve Barton and the entire behind the scenes people that really got Terrifier, that believed in Terrifier and put their name on the line for Terrifier. And you can look into a lot of the stuff with, Terrifier and Steve Barton. There's a lot there. That might be a podcast episode down the line. I need to read more about it myself, but there's some behind the scenes stuff there that maybe you should look into. But Steve Barton was very vital at bringing this franchise to where, into the theater and all that. And the fact that Terrifier, even as a unrated film of its nature, was in the theater in the first place is insane. And this is when I bring up this is when I'm going to bring up the whole Damien Leone controversy with his political comments. And, David Howard Thornton and Lauren Vera last year were talking heavily on social media with their political views, and Damien Leone posted about saying, hey, Terrifier is not a political film. All that, anybody is welcome to watch it, this, that, and the other. That comment got so much flack, and, like, I see why. I 100% see why. Do I think that Damien Leone intentionally sat down to write a film that was politically charged, that was making a political statement? No. But just even within this podcast, you see, um, we didn't even touch on like video nasties and how VHSs were being banned and movies were literally being, taken out of stores and people were not able to watch these films. And but we touched on Silent Night, Deadly Night, and the big controversy and the protest, and how that got ripped out in theaters and all that. So there is a big history of directors and actors and writers and just creative teams that just kept pushing the boundaries, that kept fighting and kept saying that these films have a place here, and they had to fight against suppression and censorship and all that. So in order to get to a spot where you get to release a film like Terrifier uncensored in a theater, that within itself is inherently in the political space, right? But again, do I think that he sat down and intentionally wrote a politically charged, politically statement movie? No. And then you've got like the Catherine Corcoran lawsuit that came out that came out at the end of last year. I don't have it up, but what I will say about that is, listen, if there is a contract in place and she's owed money, she deserves to be fucking paid. Just pay her. Because the launch of the Terrifier franchise, and Damien has said it, what's going to be different about Terrifier? What's going to get eyes on my movie? A scene that everybody has to talk about. And that scene was the hacksaw scene with Catherine as Dawn. Without her, I don't necessarily think that this franchise, like that scene that she was involved in, is massive for the success of this franchise. And you start talking about like the consent and all that. Sets need to be safe. They need to be comfortable. I don't know all the specific details. I imagine it's all gonna get sorted within the court systems or outside of court or whatever. I just hope at the end of the day that Catherine gets what she's owed. We'll see how that affects the Terrifier franchise moving forward and all that. But I just wanted to comment on that because I don't think like reading that stuff is not great, especially as a fan of the franchise. And as somebody that has had to go online and like defend the Terrifier franchise, because again, it's just like it's overly misogynistic and Damien hates women, and I just genuinely don't think that. I've met Damien several times, not that he knows who the fuck I am, but I've met him several times. I've never gotten like weird vibes like that from him, especially David Howard Thornton, Lauren Rivera. I've talked to Michael Levy so many times. Great guy. Just saw him at Halloween Horror Nights this past Halloween. It's just like I've always had great interactions with this team. So that's my experience until something comes out that's just like concrete, like holy shit. Which again, I'm not like the whole Catherine thing, like that's not good. That needs to be figured out, and I really hope it does. But Terrifier 2 is such a overnight success And it went viral, man. It went totally viral, and it was such a big success that studios wanted a piece of Terrifier 3. Like, Damien was taking meetings and reading the first few pages of the script and saying, "Yo, dog, we cannot release this." And Damien said, "Cool, fuck you. I am doing this movie like I always have for Terrifier and Terrifier 2. I'm not changing this shit." I respect that. But Terrifier was such a massive success that you got eyes from Universal, and all these major studios wanted a piece of the pie. Terrifier proved that there is an audience, a US audience, that craves blood, craves gratuitous gore, craves practical special effects. You've had all these studios and horror movies over the years that are just like, "Oh, well, like, we can't show too much. We have to cut it here. We do this." Like, audiences don't want to see that. Yes, we fucking do. Maybe not all, but there's an audience for it, and Terrifier proved that. And I think that you are seeing the proof of that kind of bleed into some of these other studios' films. Like Primate. Just from this year, I went to Fantastic Fest, and when Paramount opening film Primate, January release. No way. No way. Is this good? Major studio, first red flag. Second, January release. Second, red flag. I was floored with how brutal the gore was in Primate. And I don't want to take everything back to Terrifier, but I think Terrifier, again, just proved to studios that you don't necessarily have to hold back on the gore, the kills, the blood. Like, there is an audience that will go watch it. And if you keep your budget in a good spot, with people going with like content creators and stuff that just goes viral, you can make a fuck ton of money with gore and blood and creative kills. You can. And Terrifier proved that. Then the next kind of like evolution that I'm going to touch on, and then I'm just going to kind of wrap this up because I feel like this is super long. And if there's anything in this podcast episode that you kind of like want me to expand on or whatever, feel free to give me a comment. We can discuss this kind of stuff down the road. This is just, it's a lot. So, 2024, in a violent nature. Everybody's going, why the fuck would you talk about this movie? I just heard so many of people in my comment section screaming, going, "It's a stupid fucking movie." In a violent nature, to me, is like the most recent slasher film that I think like you saw an evolution. That third person point of view from Johnny the entire time. It takes what Maniac did in the original, it takes what Maniac did in the remake, and it just twists it. It's like you're playing a video game, and you're playing as Johnny. And maybe that's why I love In a Violent Nature so much, is because I'm a video game guy. I love first-person shooters. I love third-person shooters, but one of my favorite games of all time is The Last of Us. And part of the reason why I love The Last of Us is because you're in this open world, and, well, not open world, like, you're in the world, you have a space to go to a location to, go. You're not just dropped into a world. Anyway, that's gamer talk. I loved looting. I loved walking in the woods and looking through all of the cars and all the drawers and all the houses and finding things. part of like walking around, the sound effects, it just like immerses you in this world. That's what I loved about In a Violent Nature. People say it's a walking simulator. It's boring as fuck. What are you talking about? I get it. If that's your perspective, if that's your point of view, fine. I understand. For me, I loved walking around the woods with Johnny. I loved following Johnny walking in a field, barely hearing a conversation. And as he's getting closer to this house, the conversation's getting louder. To me, I was like, oh, brother, these motherfuckers have no idea what's coming. I loved that. Did I like the last 15 to 20 minutes? No, I didn't. If it wasn't for that last 15 to 20 minutes, I think In a Violent Nature would be an easy 9 out of 10. I gave it like a 7.5. I love it. I cannot wait for the sequel. But again, you saw this return to practical effects. And is the yoga scene kill in any way, shape, or form probably like practical in the terms of like, can he actually kill her like that? I don't fucking know, but it's gnarly as hell, and I loved it. And the fact that that's all practical special effects, again, it's another film that I think like, I'm not saying it doesn't exist without Terrifier, but in general, you're just starting to see a lot more horror films go back to practical and creative kills and things. I think Terrifier does have a lot to do with that. I cannot wait to see what they do with In a Violent Nature 2, the sequel. I can't fucking wait. Um, but yeah, slashers have kind of like they've come a long way. Last year we got Hard Eyes. I love The Mask. Um, you know, Johnny with In a Violent Nature. Uh, they've slashers just kind of always stick around. Just like at the end of a slasher film, just as you think the slasher genre is dead, it comes back for one last scare. So never assume the slasher genre is dead, because it's never dead for good. It's a genre and a style of film that I think will forever be around. It will go up and down for sure, but horror in general is a genre that studios can't ignore. So I hope you enjoyed this. I have been wanting to do this for so long. I hope this was great for you. I don't know if this was just a giant waste of your time, but I hope it wasn't. I like going through this kind of stuff and seeing the evolution and where we've been, how we, got here kind of vibe. So let me know if you liked this, if there's anything that you want me to touch on in future episodes or whatever, we can dive into it a little bit deeper. I thought like diving into the Friday the 13th lawsuit would be great. And stuff like that, but we'll see. So I'm kind of still getting into the flow of this whole podcast thing. So if you stuck around to the end, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. I need to figure out what episode 3 is going to be about. Any suggestions, whatever, feel free to comment, send me a message, whatever. I need to get this whole like, I do have a Ko-fi. I do have a Ko-fi set up. So I have a subscription page on Facebook. If you want to join that on Facebook, I have a Discord channel. Of course, I'm on TikTok and Instagram. Now that I'm in this podcast world, please don't forget to, give a 5-star review. If you ever so feel inclined, review the thing. It just helps me kind of get out into the algorithm. Yeah, we're doing the damn thing. I really appreciate you guys for sticking around while I learn all this and just listening to me yap. Really, really, really appreciate it. So until next episode, remember, watch something spooky this week.